I'm Milton Metz, your host tonight on Bywords, part of a continuing KET series on interesting personalities. We are located somewhere in the subterranean depths of a basement in downtown Louisville, not far from the Ohio River. Actually, it's the basement of Starving Artist, which is part of Actors Theatre, a nice artistic place. And with me today is the newly appointed music director of the Louisville Orchestra, Akira Endo. Now, the selection of Mr. Endo follows a careful and an agonizing 2-year search. It's something, if you don't mind a comparison, Mr. Endo, to finding a successful basketball coach, this being basketball country, or a baseball coach. Is that offensive to you?
No, not at all. That's about right. They have to turn every stone and look for the right person.
I don't know if that comparison is right. I don't think you find good conductors under stones.
Perhaps not, but you're right. It involves not just the musical considerations, but many other considerations, and that's what makes it so difficult.
Even for a non-music freak such as myself, I am aware of the fact that there have been big changes in symphonic music. For instance, the movement of the orchestral players to take control or have a substantial voice in the control of orchestras. Mm-hmm. That's something new in the last few years, isn't it?
Well, it's been, like 25 years ago, this was completely unheard of, but certainly in last 10, it's becoming more and more strong element that the players want to have more to say about, not just about the musical end of it, but the other ends as well.
What do you think about that?
Well, I suppose it's fine. I've been a player myself before, and they are human beings, and they are artists, and they should be heard.
But they want to get into labor negotiations, the selection of the music too?
Yes, that's true, and that is where difficulty arises, and somehow we hope we can sort of work, have some sort of, a balance between the two.
You think of a great classic director like conductors such as the late Arturo Toscanini.
Oh yeah, Bruno Walter, Fritz Reiner, all these people had their just...
Tough guys,
That's right. They had complete control.
They were tyrants, benevolent tyrants. They picked the music, they picked the players, the first chairs and everything.
Yes, they did, and they fired them too. Yes.
Now the orchestra says, we want a hand in who you hire as the first violinist. We want a hand in what the pay scale will be. Mm-hmm. This is you didn't go to music school to learn how to negotiate labor conditions, though.
That's right. Well, I think ultimately, still the music director has the last word in who to hire. I hope so, at least, and I'm still counting on that. In other words, it's my choice to designate who next. Whatever first chairperson might be. But it comes to dismissing a player, that's a different story. That becomes much more difficult because I understand they have jobs to protect, and my personal preference over a certain kind of player versus a certain other player, that becomes a very personal thing, and it's very difficult.
Which you would like to retain for yourself, obviously.
Yes, to a certain amount, I would say. I don't think I'd be unreasonable in letting players go, but certainly in hiring a player, I would want a complete control on that point of view.
It seems to me, Mr. Endo, that being a music conductor of a symphony is one of the most mystical jobs for a non-musician. For instance, you have a grown man holding a stick, and I'm making it very simple, conducting anywhere from 20 to 120 musicians. Mm-hmm. What are the basis of judgments, of standards? I mean, all of us have stood before our stereo or before the radio, yes, with a baton, and conducted. Everyone, and everybody seems to have a second job to be a conductor. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate the man with a stick?
Well, it's a complicated position. However, to make it very simple, it's a fun doing what I do is lots of fun, and I'm grateful for being able to make a living on what I like to do most. But you're right, it's a very complicated position. It requires, I think, two things. Number one, you have to be a musician, that whether you're a singer, pianist, or violinist, which I'm a violinist, or you play trumpet, it doesn't matter, but you have to be a musician of highest caliber to understand what a phrase is or what the music should be and so on. But then the second area, which is very important, which many conductors lack, is the human side of it. That is, being compassionate, know how to rehearse. You know, sometimes the same orchestra, you have this vibration of today somehow things are not going well, and the players are sort of restless. You have to sense that. In that case, you just play. You don't talk too much. You just don't rehearse much, but just cover the grounds. Other days, they pay much more attention. Fine, then you can stop often, rehearse details, and works fine. But, you know, those things you have to understand. That's the human side of it.
That's interesting. Now, if you don't mind my coming back to a comparison to sports,
Sure.
if it doesn't bother you. I've talked to many successful coaches, and it seems to me the best coaches are very good with their people. It's very good to get a 7-foot giant who can throw the ball through the hoop. Anybody could look good under those circumstances.
Right.
But the most sensitive coaches say one young man will react to a pat on the back. Another young man will react better to a kick in the rear. Another one will react best to an arm around the shoulder. Is it like that in any way between a conductor and the sidemen, the orchestra?
I think so. See, this helps because I was a player in the orchestra for many years. It really helps to understand this. I think the human contact is so important, and I think every orchestra and every player in the orchestra, they react a little differently. And when I guest conduct all over the country and sometimes in Europe, I'm aware of this difference in people, how they react, and orchestra, how they play. And I think good conductor will, what's the word, instead of really trying to change things, try to bring out the best in them and try to suppress the negative side of the orchestra. And that's the good conductor.
Conducting for different national groups, do you find a certain characteristic in one land as compared to another?
Oh, yes.
So that your treatment of the orchestra in country A is different from country
Oh,
B?
yes, oh, yes. For instance, the orchestra in Vienna, incredibly, they play always behind the beat. Their tone production of the woodwinds are slightly different from American concept. Things like this. When you're not aware of it, when you go first time, you really freak out. You know, it's just so different.
Do you ever holler at any of your people?
No, that's not my
Never?
style.
Some do, though.
Oh, so I've heard them, and I've played under conductors who do, yeah.
Curse?
Often.
Does
Sure.
it work for some of them?
It does. Well, you see, if the conductor is a very fine musician, players don't mind. I mean, they'll accept some of the abuse because he's a great man, yes. But when it's not so, then that's when the problem occurs.
Something that's interesting to me and slightly puzzles me is that some conductors get the reputation for being better at conducting, say, romantic music than, say, modern music. One would think that music is music is music, and if you're talented, that you can do it all. Not
Yes,
so?
I think to a certain extent it's true that the conductor should be able to do everything equally. But I think it's personality, for one, and secondly, his own musical taste. It begins to show. Now, for instance, Zubin Mehta of the New York Philharmonic, I mean, he just strives and loves heavy German romantic things. So his Mahlers and Bruckners are fantastic. Whereas when it comes to little, you know, simple Mozart or even early Beethoven's, then, you know, there's some question marks.
I propose that it interests me because I have talked to the great American actor Victor Jory about acting styles, you know, for
Yes.
Shakespeare versus
Sure.
farce
Sure.
versus, you know, an English drawing room comedy. And it's interesting that some actors may be able to do a competent job of all of them, but maybe just some of them. And like that in music, I
It's
presume.
very true in music too, and also the experience. For instance, I'm not ready to conduct Mahlers or heavy Bruckner. I just haven't had enough to do it, you know. And I certainly don't expect me to, for myself to get up in front of a Louisville Orchestra and try my first Bruckner Seventh Symphony. I'm going to go somewhere in a little town where no one knows me and do my first Bruckner Seventh. Then going to come back and say, here I feel, because doing it is so important, and this is where I'm not a fool. I want to, you know, make sure I'm ready for it.
This is a generalized question
Sure.
with all the weakness of a generalization. Do critics know what they're about?
Some do, some don't. Once again, it depends on man's experience and background. I think.
Can you tell by reading him, Akira, whether he knows?
Yes, yes. And I think in Louisville we have very fine critics.
A critic says, the orchestra under so-and-so did not penetrate the inner meanings of this movement. What does that mean?
Yes, that's very difficult, yes.
Does that sound familiar to you?
Well, sometimes, yes. They do talk about the generalities, and also they do talk about certain interpretation, you know, but the interpretation is one's own. And if he disagrees, he should say so, but not to say that, that somehow it did not penetrate. That doesn't really say much, does it? Yes.
I don't want, I'm not seeking to curry your favor, but it didn't say much to me when I read that kind of a line. I didn't know what it meant.
You're right. I think if he disagrees with the conductor's inversion, just simply say so, that this somehow did not seem to agree with mine.
Would you like to say, this clown didn't know what he was doing on the podium?
Yes. Wow.
That's pretty cruel.
That's
though.
cruel. Yes, it is.
Is there an interesting story of how you were discovered? You're not an American born.
No, I'm not. Yes, I was in Japan playing my violin and starting to be a violinist. And I think the biggest opportunity came when I was discovered, so to speak, by an American sailor who heard me play in a very casual beer hall atmosphere. I was playing in a beer hall as a part entertainer between intermissions.
Pop stuff?
Sometimes, but mostly I played straight things. They have like a 40 minutes of band, popular group, and then I come on intermission and play 15 minutes of everything from Fritz Kreisler little pieces to Bach and things like this. And I did this for about 2 years and making enough money to pay for my own lessons. So anyway, this particular sailor got interested in what I was doing, and he wrote to his parents who lived in Long Beach, California, and they decided to sponsor me to come to the United States.
Remarkable.
This was a remarkable story because we're talking about 1953, 54. I arrived here in 1954.
A regular gob, as we would call him, right?
He was a cook on a tugboat. And
with a good ear for music, obviously.
Well, not necessarily. He loved country western, you know, and so fine. But somehow he was interested in my career. So.
And that strange occurrence got you to the United States.
Yes, and not only that, yeah, I came to the right city at the right time, and also the right music teacher, and all that just somehow was sort of like chosen, you know, pre-planned.
To Long Beach, California?
Yes. And I went to one of the finest teachers in Los Angeles to study.
Under their auspices?
Yes,
They picked up the tab for you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How very wonderful.
Yes.
They must be dear friends to you.
Yes, they are.
Then you continued your career in Long Beach.
Well, yes, I graduated from high school in Long Beach, and then I went to USC, University of Southern California, to be music major, and studied violin there, and music education, all the musical courses that there needs to be for a musician. And I had some very fine experiences there, playing and doing all kinds of different things.
And you were a world-class violinist. You were in prize competitions.
Yes, but I wouldn't say world-class. I knew my own limitations as a violinist. For instance, when I attended master class of Jascha Heifetz, who's greatest, perhaps one of the all-time greats, he had some fine students, and I hear these students play and say, "Wow, I'm not anywhere near where they are." You know, so in other words, it just depends. I mean, if I'm good in certain sense, yes, but in local level, perhaps I don't know, but certainly not world class.
Heifetz is a standard by which most or all violinists are judged today.
Well, certainly he is one of the persons which we all look up to, and certainly we are judged by.
A remarkable man.
Remarkable man, remarkable person, and a very private person. Not many people know Jascha Heifetz privately.
Now, you were getting great satisfaction out of being a violinist, pretty well acclaimed, concertizing, and studying under the great Heifetz and other greats. You wanted something else. You wanted to conduct. Why wasn't just playing the violin enough?
Well, you see, conducting came for me as accident in a way. I really didn't intend to be a conductor. I didn't study to be a conductor, and when I graduated from USC, I had the opportunity to accept a position teaching at the Long Beach City College, which is a university or small college, and they needed the orchestra conductor to work with the college orchestra because the conductor before them resigned or something, left. And since I was a violinist and played in many orchestras, they felt that I was most qualified. So, Endo, will you please conduct the orchestra this semester? I said, fine, I would like to try. So this is how I got started. And the more I got into it, the more I felt that I can express myself better. And I really enjoyed working with musicians, and this is how I got started.
Did you take any conducting classes?
Oh yes, every music major students always take conducting 1, conducting 2, which is required. You learn how to beat the patterns, you study textbooks on how to do things, and you know what are some of the the very basic things. But I think as a player, as I played, I watched conductors, and I really had made some mental notes. You know, it's like a computers, and then begin to come back and say, oh yeah, I remember this used to work very well for this particular conductor, and I try it. And so my style is very much really a combination of many, many conductors I played under, and I seem to remember some of the good points and some of the strong points.
All right, here we are in Kentucky. You're now music director of the Louisville Orchestra. We're talking to a lot of people who perhaps are like myself, who like music but can't read music, occasionally go to a symphony or buy a subscription. What can you tell me? How can I judge? Do I know enough to judge a conductor from the audience?
I have to flatly say no, probably, to be honest, because, you know, it becomes like a popularity contest. In other words, if you're saying, okay, I like this conductor more than the other person, or this particular conductor looks better, or I like his Mozart, well, if you're talking about the real interpretation of Mozart, that's fine. If you really understand, and if you heard many different Mozarts by a very different conductor, that's fine. But I think most times, if you say that I like this conductor better than the other, it just becomes a sort of a instinctive, impression more than real meat things we're talking about.
It would take somebody with some heavy music knowledge to make that judgment.
I think so, yes.
Well, what about when committees come around made up of businessmen? They sign the checks, and they may like a successful subscription, but how can they, in their wisdom, know a good conductor?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's you know, that's a big question, but I try to answer it the best I can. I think there's a number of elements you have to consider. One of the most important, I think, is the orchestra and its reaction. After all, the 100 people in the orchestra or 90 people we have here, they're the one who have to work with the music director.
Now, the committee must have been influenced by the fact that the Louisville Orchestra, after first appearance by you, requested your return for another engagement.
I'm very pleased about that, yes, very much so. I think the committee heard the voices of the orchestra, which is very good. Yes.
You have a sizable reputation for conducting ballets.
Yes.
Very strong in that.
Yes. That's, again, because my background is, you see, I had a very nice break in 1969 to join one of the foremost ballet company in the world, American Ballet Theatre. And since they liked my work, I stayed with them for 10 years, and that's a long time.
Do you know Mikhail Baryshnikov well enough to call him Misha?
Oh, yes, intimately. He and I worked for many years together, yes. Ever since his defection, I've been almost like his personal conductor.
Extraordinary talent.
Very fine dancer.
Tell us something about Baryshnikov.
Well, you see, dancer like him doesn't come, well, it's just like once in a century. It really, when you see him dance, it's very special. Technically, of course, he's impeccable, and what makes him so different is daring styles. When he jumps or he does a turn in the air, you say, he's not going to make it. He's going to fall.
Really?
But he comes down right, and that's what makes it. It's like almost a combination of a dancing with a circus element to it. It's just certain amount of excitement that he's not going to quite do it, you know, but he always does, of course.
It's more than just obviously gymnastics.
That's right. Oh, no. It's a very controlled and very well, he's a remarkable man also, personally also. And
does he have a great personal charm?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. But then he has a very private side, too. And that's a side that most of us don't see. And sometimes he's very open and very hospitable and loves parties and loves go dancing. And then there are times he just rather sort of stay in his room, you know, and that he does his own thinking there.
Have you seen him boogie and do the American dances, too?
He's a fantastic. Once he danced this disco with Liza Minnelli. It was wonderful. At a party.
Yes. Well, they did a special
show together, yes, too.
It was wonderful.
But this was way before that. This was at a private party, and they had this little dancing session. It was wonderful.
You're good friends with him.
Yes.
Leonard Bernstein,
Yes.
the great American conductor, has also thought highly of your work. In what ways have you been related to him?
Well, actually I owe my career to him because until he saw me work, I was a college conductor in Long Beach. There was a competition in New York City in 1968 and 69 called Dimitri Metropolis International Competition. And Mr. Bernstein was the chairman of the judges. There are 10 famous conductors from all over the world, literally, and he was the chairman. And 40 of us, young conductors, were invited to come to New York City. And this was, again, international, so there were like 9 American contestants, 4 Germans, 4 Italians, 4 English, and some from Asia, and all over the country, world, actually. And we competed against each other, the American Symphony Orchestra at the Carnegie Hall. And we went series of eliminations, required repertoires, and so forth. Anyway, I didn't win first prize, but I was fortunate enough to be in the finals and win third prize. And Mr. Bernstein saw my work, and later, when the American Ballet Theatre asked him to recommend one of the finalists to be the conductor for the American Ballet Theatre, as an assistant conductor, that is, Mr. Bernstein said, well, Endo looks most promising or fit for the job. And he didn't pick any of the first prize winners, but he chose me. And so when Mr. Bernstein says, well, it happens, of course.
Right, right. And probably something like that must have happened to him a generation ago in Boston, I suppose.
Well, I'm sure, but of course his credentials are unquestionably the best. I mean, I've no doubt that he would be discovered anywhere, but certainly I'm sure that similar things happen.
And he has a generosity of spirit toward young emerging talents, which not all older artists have, I presume.
That's right. He has brought many young artists, including Andre Watts and some of the wonderful young concertizing artists today.
What's the Endo family like? What's it made up of?
Okay, I'm a single parent. I have 3 children who are, well, very talented in many ways. I have a daughter who's 16, she'll be 17 very soon, who's a very serious French horn player. And I tried to discourage her, but no, I mean, who wants a family of horn players? My son is 15, he's as tall as I am now, but he's clarinet player. He's a clarinet player, but he's playing as more a band. He just socializing. A band he thinks is great, football games, all this, that's his thing. And my 12-year-old daughter is, Julie is very much trying to look like 16 or 18, spends many hours beautifying herself. So that's the family,
normal, right?
And we have a good time, and it's a nice family.
What do you like to do? I realize, like a fan magazine writer, but I think it's a pertinent question. What do you like to do when you're not rehearsing and conducting and picking out musical scores?
Okay, I like to play tennis and also like to cook. So I'm experimenting either in the kitchen or somewhere outside, hopefully playing tennis. But that doesn't always happen, but I like to read also.
Who are your friends? Are they all mostly musicians?
Well, certainly, a large portion of my friends are musicians, but certainly not all. I have very varied friends, everything from lawyers, doctors, tennis partners, to some disco and boogieing friends, because I like to go dancing, and that's one thing I'm going to have to find in Louisville is a late-night dance spot.
Well, this place here, the Starving Artist,
This looks fine. If we can just get a band and a crowd.
They swing a little bit some nights,
fine.
yes, that's right. You going to like Louisville?
I like it so far very, very much, yes.
Who did you leave behind in Japan?
Well, my parents are still there, my brother, my sister. I'm the oldest of the 3 in the family. But my family is doing fine. My parents did come to visit me last year, and they're coming back again this year, I think. They had such a wonderful time. I didn't see my parents for 25 years, since I left Japan in '54. And the last year, or actually it was 1979, so almost a year and a half ago, was the first time I've seen them in 25 years.
I would assume it was a very emotional meeting.
Yes, it was. However, after the first 10, 15 minutes, then it was like nothing has ever happened. We just carried conversation right on, and what a wonderful time. They stayed here for a month with us, and it's great.
When you're up for a job, as a music conductor of a Metropolitan Orchestra, such as Louisville Orchestra, you know that the committee has looked at and is looking at a lot of others, that the musicians are looking at you because they're going to have to live with you for X number of years. And you're under close scrutiny. And not that you're, you know, poverty-stricken and don't, you know, and won't eat if you don't get the job. Nevertheless, you want it or else you wouldn't be in the competition. And you're under that scrutiny. Is it nerve-wracking?
Not really. At least it was not for me. I'm grateful that I'm here, and I'm grateful that I got the job. But you see, I had a very happy situation in Austin, Texas, which I still associate with them now. I'm easing out of the Austin situation because now they're going through the same thing that Louisville went through just 2 years. In other words, they're looking for a new music director there to take my place. So anyway, I had a nice situation, and not particularly was looking around. I really was not. And somehow this time was right that I have to come to Louisville with the Baryshnikov to do Petrushka. And they liked my work, and was middle of the search. They couldn't find anyone they was suitable for them, and just how it came about. So for me, it was like a big, wonderful thing that suddenly dropped on me. It just was wonderful.
Now, does Baryshnikov know that you're here?
Or he does, yes.
And will we see more of him? And
I certainly hope so. If I have anything to say about it, I'm going to. Well, certainly, I'm sure that Louisville Ballet is, you know, anxious to bring him back. Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much.